Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album, the 7th overall, from American heavy metal, nu metal juggernauts, Slipknot, entitled The End So Far. If you've paid any attention to rock or metal music over the course of the past 25 years or so, then there's a very good chance you'll already know at least a little bit about Slipknot. But just in case you don't, allow me to be the first to inform you that Slipknot is one of the most popular, one of the most successful, influential, and notorious metal bands of the 21st century. They've toured the world, they have their own signature festival, they've sold 30 million records, they've won Grammy Awards, and they've done all of this despite having sonically and lyrically perhaps one of the darkest sounds that you can find within the realms of mainstream rock and metal music. Early records like the self-titled debut and Iowa are rabid, ferocious, violent, cutthroat, filled with depraved, demented, often disturbing lyrics about self-harm and hatred and loneliness and depression and despair. It's not just punishing, it's borderline masochistic. The music as well pulls heavy influence from nu metal of the time in the 1990s, with a lot of weird extra percussion and turntables and keyboards, but it also pulls from death metal and from groove metal and from hardcore. And remarkably, even as the band's profile grew, they remained a relatively extreme band. I mean, they had more radio-friendly moments on records like Volume 3 and All Hope Is Gone and Point 5 The Grey Chapter, but all things considered, these guys were still playing around with some pretty hard-hitting stuff, at least hard-hitting by the standards of your average kind of rock listener. Surprisingly, Slipknot have remained relatively ambitious through the years as well. Their previous studio album, We Are Not Your Kind, combined elements from Iowa and Volume 3 with new influences from classic rock, progressive rock, and alternative and experimental rock, and it also had a kind of flow and feel akin to classic concept albums and rock operas from artists like The Who, Pink Floyd, and Meatloaf. With this in mind, it should not at all be shocking to hear that A, expectations are pretty fucking sky high, and that this is one of the most anticipated albums of 2022, and that B, there's already an absurd amount of glowing, almost overwhelming praise being levied upon this album by nearly every major rock outlet and publication that you can think of. To be entirely blunt, the amount of Slipknot ass-kissing and dick-riding I've seen these past couple of weeks is enough to put even the most notorious and raunchy and nasty of porn stars to shame. So I guess the question for today's video is, ultimately, is all of this justified? Does Slipknot have a truly spectacular, one-of-a-kind dick? Or is everyone just a little bit too horny and too ashamed to admit it? Respectfully, I think it's a little bit of both. The parts of this record that really stand out to me would be the ones that expand on the more experimental deviations and endeavors of the aforementioned We Are Not Your Kind. The track Adderall, for instance, quite boldly and bravely opens this album not with an explosive bang, but rather with a very anguished and introspective whimper. There are a lot of repetitive keyboards and a lot of haunting vocal passages and droning dissonant guitars and a lot of soundscapes and vibes more reminiscent of the Next Day and Black Star era David Bowie rather than anything that we might normally expect from Slipknot. Then there's Acidic, which contrasts a totally bonkers and chaotic chorus with some more alt-rock grunge kind of verses and harmonies and melodies reminiscent of Stone Temple Pilots and maybe even just a little bit of Faith No More. Corey Taylor even does a little bit of a blues croon here, and there's a lot of really punchy percussion and bass parts. There's also Desaad, which simultaneously acts as a really big melodic rock ballad for the band, but also sports some really dark and menacing atmospheres and even a little bit of a prog metal underbelly. And right after that, you have the aptly titled finale, which closes out this album on a very cinematic and evocative note, with lush strings and pianos and some very dramatic vocals and a little bit of a symphonic bombast. And all of this brings to mind like Slipknot's take on something like November Rain from Guns N' Roses, albeit much less bloated and pretentious. Now, not all of the experimentation pans out. Yen, for instance, is a slow-burning, moody, kind of dark, nu metal ballad. It tries to balance some of the tones of classic Slipknot with something like Snuff. It does not work at all, in my opinion. The turntable solo and a lot of Corey's lyrics on here are cringe as fuck. But even so, these songs, these moments, warts and all, are what consistently capture my attention and my curiosity throughout the course of the end so far. They are what I am most invested in. These songs are more clever, they take more risks, they're more ambitious, and they're more interesting, at least to me. But I already know I'm going to be in the minority on this. I already know that the typical Slipknot fan is going to come into this record just looking for the typical Slipknot anthems. And good for you, because there are quite a few of those here. Stuff like Warranty, Chapeltown Rag, The Dying Song, they're aggressive, they're gnarly, they're mean, they're angry, they are fun, but they're also very one-dimensional, very predictable. It's the kind of stuff Slipknot could do in their sleep at this point. Gotta say, too, listening to Corey Taylor rant about, like, scandals and dishonesty on the internet and disingenuous behavior and cancel culture is so fucking lame. It radiates the purest kind of boomer energy I've seen in a while. This is on par with the type of shit that Music of Destruction will write in all of his community posts. Gotta say, though, as a vocalist, Corey Taylor still sounds pretty fucking great. Like, his screams and his roars are as ferocious as ever. I feel comfortable saying that there's no other rock or metal singer right now that can command a chorus as well as he can. Jay Weinberg sounding great behind the kit as well, so much so that I'm continuing to question why we need extra percussionists, but what the fuck ever. From what I understand, there was a little bit of frustration behind the scenes in regards to the actual production process. Jim Root detailed it a bit in a recent interview with Revolver magazine, but I think unintentionally that frustration has kind of added to the temperature and to the intensity of the record. I think it has made it all the more fierce and pungent and punchy. I'm feeling a solid, enthusiastic 3 out of 5 on this. Is the album overhyped? Damn fucking straight it is. But you know, it's Slipknot. They still sound really good. They still have plenty of tight, tasty jams. They are still willing to experiment, which I really love. Those are my favorite moments of the record. I think it's well made, and I think people who love Slipknot will probably love this album. It'll be very interesting to see where Slipknot go from here, because this is their final album released through Roadrunner Records, which means they're kind of unsigned at the moment, kind of, sort of. So this gives them a lot of freedom to do a whole lot of other things in the future. It's great to see after all these years, Slipknot are still hungry, they're still pissed off, there's still a lot they want to do. Is this album overhyped? Hell yeah. Is there a lot of dick riding going on? You fucking bet. But it's easy to see why. It's a pretty impressive dick. Give it a try. 3 to 5. Honestly, it's pretty decent. It's not amazing. It's not the best album of the year, so calm down. But it is, you know, it's solid. You'll enjoy it. Probably. Maybe. Hopefully. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.